If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. You are listening to the Delphi Murders case series. This is episode 35, Ron Logan. We're going to be going over Ron Logan, the latest FBI search warrant information regarding Ron Logan, various affidavits, various new theories that some postulate might tie everything together, including the Kleins, and finally make sense of this whole thing. So, yeah, there's developments. The case is moving. Some believe it is right on the precipice of being solved, with charges being filed and arrest being made shortly. Others counter that law enforcement are a bunch of bumbling buffoon Keystone cops, and this is as far as ever from being solved. And this is all just nothing but blown smoke. So on Mindshock, obviously, we'll be examining all of these theories with logic and reason at the forefront. If you enjoy the Mindshock podcast, find it interesting and informative, you can donate to our PayPal, help support the channel. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share the podcast, keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases such as this one, as well as others, missing persons cases, wrongful convictions, and more. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, non-suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, let's jump right into this new information brought forth within the past few weeks regarding Ron Logan court documents and more. So let's go to WTHR.com. FBI agent believed clothing taken and bodies staged in Delphi murders. Search warrant request. And just real quick, again, for those that just have a hard time believing that the bodies weren't there, and that they were either killed later or possibly killed around the same time but elsewhere and then brought back. I mean, staged means that the crime scene was not natural as the crime unfolded. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't take place where the bodies were found and staged, but it could mean that, particularly when you take into account the thermal imaging drone, the fact that they weren't found when both sides of the creek were searched by multiple people, and then afterwards someone was directing people away from searching that area where the bodies were ultimately found. The magically appearing shoe and other clothing that was not found the previous day. I mean, all of this just weirdness that it just points away to the bodies being there. I mean, this is wintertime. There's no leaves on the trees. You can see that general area. Obviously, screams would have been heard with the supposed amount of people that was out on the trails that day. I mean, people have reenacted sound tests. I mean, piercing screams in the middle of the day, especially that day when it was unseasonably warm and there was a lot of people out. It just doesn't seem to add up. Just based on all available information, it seems like they were not killed at the time that most people think, and that their bodies were not where they were ultimately found for many, many hours. Now, there were screams reported in the middle of the night. Was it 1 or 2 a.m. or something? And I don't know. Nobody knows what that was. But anyway, let's continue with the article here. This was posted May 17th, 2022. Earlier in the Delphi murders investigation, an FBI agent believed a possible suspect in 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German's deaths lived at a property near where their bodies were found. Court documents released by the Murder Sheet podcast detail a search warrant request made March 17, 2017. The request is to search the home of Ronald Logan, which is 1,400 feet from where the bodies of Williams and German were found. You know what's kind of weird? Didn't the early reports state that this was his actual property where they were found? So they want to search the home. So is this technically his property? So his home is 1,400 feet from the bodies, which are on his property, allegedly. In citing reasons for the search warrant, the FBI agent noted that pieces of clothing from one of the victims were missing and that it appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. There were no visible signs of a struggle or fight. That's another interesting piece of information that a lot of these coincidence theorists who, for whatever reason, they're very religiously devout about the girls being killed where they were found. I don't know why, but there's this religious fervor and anti-science sentiment going in, again, just trying to dismiss the thermal imaging drone, trying to dismiss any and all searchers who searched that exact area. I mean, it's really weird. But here it's stated very clearly, no visible signs of a struggle or fight. Let me repeat that again for the Dunning-Kruger crowd. There were no visible signs of a struggle or fight. The agent suspected a souvenir had been taken by the killer and that it was common for perpetrators to memorialize the crime scene with pictures. FBI agent said investigators did recover fibers and unidentified hairs at the crime scene. The FBI agent also noted that 77-year-old Ron Logan appeared to be in physical condition and that his voice was not inconsistent with that of the voice captured on German's phone. The agent also confirmed that video on German's phone was actually 43 seconds long. Also, again, some just really think Ron Logan looks exactly like the bridge guy. But again, if it was somebody like Kurtz who was intimately familiar with Logan's property, he could have warned, or whoever. Some people think Ashley Garth is bridge guy, and it's not a male. But anyway, they could have worn his clothes to frame him. I mean, why would he... I mean, it's kind of weird. Why would he dump the bodies on his own property? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, here's a further theory. Like, we went over this one before. If someone's trying to frame Ron Logan, so that, of course they would put the bodies and maybe dress up like him and put the bodies on his property. What if he is the murderer, and he had the bodies elsewhere, and someone who knew he was the murderer put the bodies on his property to be discovered, so that way they would get the right guy? Now, whether the individual that put the bodies, that staged the bodies on Logan's property, maybe they were involved in the crime, maybe they weren't, but either way, they wanted him to be prosecuted for this crime. The FBI agent notes an interview with Logan's relative, in which the relative tells the agent Logan called them the morning of February 14th, 2017, and asked them to lie about where he had been the previous afternoon. This was prior to the bodies being discovered. Logan allegedly asked the relative to say they drove to a Lafayette aquarium store at a time that matched when Williams and German went missing around 2 p.m. A receipt found in Logan's home showed a checkout time of 5:21 p.m., and the FBI agent noted the store was approximately 30 minutes from Logan's home. The agent said Logan's statement about his whereabouts were found to be factually false and intentionally designed to deceive law enforcement officers. You know what else is weird? Early on, all those press conference information where supposedly this was just a guy whose alibi had to be broken. Are they talking about were they talking about Ron Logan this entire time? The FBI agent said the relative believed the original image of the suspect looked like Logan. A woman who had been in a relationship with Logan years earlier told law enforcement that Logan had been physically abusive, threatened that he could kill her and no one would find her body, and that Logan carried a gun with him everywhere he went in a fanny pack. She told the agent that when she first saw the image of the suspect, she thought it was Logan. So that's two people, friends and or family members and or ex-girlfriends, who think it's Ron Logan. Now we have woman number 3, another woman who had been in a relationship with Logan, told law enforcement that when she heard bodies were found near Logan's home, she believed he was involved. So not necessarily seeing the image, but just from hearing that bodies were found on the property, she I guess, wouldn't put it past Logan. The FBI agent noted that a search of a tip database about a month after the murders had 15 tips connecting Logan to the murders. And you know what else would be curious? We don't have this comparison. How many tips were on Kurtz or Garth or any of these other POIs, like Chadwell? Were 15 tips the most amount of tips going towards a single individual? Because, I mean, that's, those kinds of controls. We need to know what the average amount of tips for the average POI was. 15 is obviously more than 1 or 2. I mean, that's not 0. That's quite a bit of tips. Quite a bit of people think it's him. The FBI agent also claimed that text messages sent to and from Logan's phone the evening of February 13th, 2017 showed he was likely outside his home and in the proximity of where Liberty German and Abigail Williams' bodies were located. The agent noted that Logan had been physically able to get up and down the hill from his home to the crime scene, where he met with officers on February 17th. The agent was specific that they believed Logan could be involved in the murders. I believe there is probable cause to believe that, so this is a quote from the FBI agent here. I believe there is probable cause to believe that Ronald Logan has committed the crime of murder, and evidence of that could be found on Ronald Logan's property, end quote. The FBI got permission to search the entire property, including Logan's home, garage, his pickup truck, computers, and cell phones. A previous search of Logan's home on March 6th for a parole violation noted he had numerous weapons, including handguns and knives. Logan died in 2020 and was never officially named a suspect in the Delphi murders. Any conclusion based on the document would be inappropriate because the warrant is just one sliver of a complicated puzzle, said ISP Superintendent Doug Carter. Solving the case is as important to us now as it was 5 years ago. Now, would he say something like that because there's more than one individual? Was it Logan and the Kleins in cahoots? Was Kurtz here? Was Kurtz, who's in prison for murder, was Kurtz, who, again, rode horses on Logan's land? Some people say that Logan is his uncle or something, but who knows if that means blood uncle or not. If you haven't checked out the Mindshock podcast on non-blood uncles, perhaps that would be relevant. There's a lot of confusion in how people call other people uncles. But either way, Kurtz grew up riding horses on Logan's land. He's very familiar with Logan's land. Is it possible Kurtz found out about it and not necessarily involved in the murder, but did he move the bodies back from wherever they were to Logan's land so they would get Ron Logan? And if there are other individuals involved, is he too scared to say that? I don't know if I've announced the McGuire theory in the Delphi murders case. I might have to make this the McGuire theory. I'm not saying it's true in any way. I'm not hallucinating likelihoods, whether it's more or less likely than any other theory. I am simply putting forth a theory. I am not saying I believe it's true. There's not enough information. I am simply putting forth a theoretical possibility that perhaps the reason why there's all of this uncertainty around Kurtz and possibly even Garth, but something happened, and Kurtz and Garth know about the murders, whether they put them into effect or not, and then possibly Ron Logan and the Kleins are also involved. For whatever reason, Kurtz wanted the bodies to be found on Logan's land because he wanted to implicate Logan because maybe Logan is actually guilty. Or perhaps if he's really not guilty, but they want revenge on Logan for what reason? Now, Logan's was also burglarized or something, however much time earlier. I mean, we went over this in previous episodes. Make sure you check them all out so you're all caught up. But that's the McGuire theory. Logan possibly guilty If he's guilty, someone put the bodies back on his property so they would get the guilty party. Now, there might be multiple parties involved, however. Maybe they thought, maybe there's no evidence of the other parties, or if there's some kind of big ring involved with high-level officials, former judges, or mayors, they knew that Logan would not roll on them. He wouldn't snitch on him because of the others involved, so they felt safe in framing Logan. Is that the critical piece of the puzzle that's missing here? But let's continue here. Police looking at Anthony Schott's account. On December 6, 2021, Indiana State Police investigating the Delphi murders asked for help from anyone who had contact with the Anthony Schott's account profile. Detectives said the account with the username Anthony Schatz was used on Snapchat and Instagram, among other social media platforms, in 2016 and 2017. State police say the person behind the account used photos of a male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. Investigators say the person used the profile to communicate with underage girls to solicit nude images and want to know if anyone got requests to get their address or to meet with them. Police said they've identified the male model that was used in the photos on the account, and the man is not a person of interest in the Delphi case. Okay, so that's the information there. So another article here, wishtv.com. FBI search warrant raises questions about Delphi property owner's arrest by Demi Johnson, May 18th, 2022. iTeammate broke the news on Tuesday about an FBI search warrant and reveals new details about the Delphi murder scene and what the killer of Abby Williams and Liberty German may have taken from the property. iTeammate has pieced together new information about Ron Logan, the man targeted in that search warrant. In the FBI report, the FBI stated Logan lied to investigators about what he was doing on the day the girls disappeared. iTeammate's archives has an interview with Logan in the days after the girls were found. Quote, Monday afternoon I was in Lafayette Aquarium World getting tropical fish for my aquarium, so when I came home, one of the neighbors asked for permission to come back here and search for the missing girls, and that's the first time I heard anything about it, Logan told News 8 in February 2017. So, I fooled with my tropical fish the whole time the search was going on Monday night, but then they didn't find them around Tuesday until noon or 1 or whatever it was. End quote. You know what's weird, though? I mean, okay, he's 77, but still, is it or is it not weird that he didn't assist for the search that was going on his own land? So he's just playing with the fish indoors. Now, if he doesn't think it's serious, I guess if he doesn't think it's serious, I don't know. Investigators believe Logan asked his cousin to lie and tell police he drove Logan to an aquarium store in Lafayette on the afternoon of February 13th, 2017. Police would eventually arrest Logan for violating his probation on charges of DUI and driving on a suspended license. He appeared in court March 13th on that charge. The next day, March 14th, an Indiana State Police spokesperson tweeted, "Reports connecting Ron Logan to Delphi murders is false. Probation violation, no connection to murder investigation." However, in a search warrant filed 3 days later, March 17th, an FBI agent wrote, "I believe there is probable cause to believe that Ronald Logan has committed the crime of murder, and evidence of that can be found on Ronald Logan's property." So, you know what's weird, though? This is why all these authority-worshipping cultists, like these Dunning-Kruger groups that just worship whatever they hear on the idiot box, a lot of times it's wrong. A lot of times what's reported on the idiot box is wrong. I know this is so mind-shocking. But you see goofs, so-called true crime aficionados, still repeating as gospel whatever, all these conflicting statements that law enforcement have made, not just in this case, but in other cases, as if these statements are gospel. Now again, that doesn't mean the Indiana State Police spokesperson was lying. Perhaps they were not aware. Because this is an Indiana State Police spokesperson. So they're aware that Ron Logan was arrested for a probation violation. If they're not privy to any other information about an FBI search warrant, then they're not lying, but the statement is still not accurate. And this is something all these gullible goofs out there who just worship whatever they hear on the idiot box, this is why it's problematic. And these goofs never go back and learn from their mistakes. They never want to look at it in hindsight. Oh, maybe this wasn't accurate information. And then they built this house of cards and all these various theories, and they don't realize that it's a house of cards because that base layer is incorrect. Continuing on here, the agent also writes, based on investigators' experience, it is reasonable to believe that the creation of an alibi prior to the discovery of a crime indicates culpability or knowledge of the crime. And that's a very interesting point. So I don't see an exact time here, but supposedly on the morning of the 14th is when Logan asked this family member to lie. The family member said that Logan had never asked him to lie in the past before. So, is he asking... This is kind of weird. So he's asking his cousin to tell him to lie about his alibi before the bodies are found. So, as far as anybody knows, the girls are just missing. They're not dead or anything. So why is he asking for this lie? And that's an interesting point there. That's an interesting point. So let me repeat what the agent wrote here. Based on investigators' experience, it is reasonable to believe that the creation of an alibi prior to the discovery of a crime indicates culpability or knowledge of the crime. Logan pleaded guilty to a new charge of being a habitual traffic violator on April 3rd, 2017. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, a sentence that would eventually be reduced to home detention. The search warrant application reveals never before discussed details about the crime scene and how the girls were found. A large amount of blood was lost by the victims at the crime scene, the FBI agent wrote. The warrant also reveals that 2 articles of clothing from one of the girls was missing from the crime scene while the rest of their clothing was recovered. It also appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. Logan has never been publicly named a suspect in Abby and Libby's murders. He's also not been charged in the case. He died January 24th, 2022. I-Team 8 sent several detailed questions to Indiana State Police about the case and was told they can't comment on the case. Okay then, so a lot of new information there. So some counterpoints here. Actually, before we get into the counterpoints, I went over this other, I'm assuming it's a different FBI agent, who's stating that, so this was a few months ago, he said investigators looking into the murders of Abby and Libby are likely taking their time to make sure they have everything right before making an arrest. So he was basically stating that an arrest is imminent, so to speak. Not necessarily extremely imminent, but that they know who did it, and they're just getting their ducks in a row. And this was... again, more around the time of the Keegan Kline police transcript leak. Or alleged leak. So, you know, that's an issue too, because are they say... Because they... Basically, Keegan Kline has said that they believe his father did it. So, or are they simply going down different avenues? Do certain investigators believe it was Tony Kline, other investigators believe it's Ron Logan? Or do they believe they were somehow working together? And again, where does Kurtz fit into all of this? So let's look at a rebuttal here, basically, to those who believe it's Ron Logan. This is on the Delphi Murders subreddit, posted by Mount Georgia Guy. Let's not get carried away about the Ron Logan warrant. Posted part of this last night at another forum. We have to remember this information is new to us, not law enforcement. My takeaways from the warrant and other info we know from the Keegan Kline investigation. 1, this is a peek into law enforcement's investigation similar to the warrants and questioning of Keegan Kline. Don't take it for anything more than a POI being looked into during the investigation. 2, similar to Keegan Kline and Tony Kline, most of the links to Ron Logan are circumstantial. Tip on looking like bridge guy, violent past with females, etc. Not enough for a DA to feel comfortable about getting a conviction. I mean, that... Okay. 3, Ron Logan's request for an alibi during the time of the abduction and murders is interesting. He was not concerned about other times he was driving and wanting an alibi for those, so this is very suspect. I mean, that's one of the most suspect points. So he's calling somebody right before the bodies are found. Unless he know... does he know they're going to be found because he knows where they are at that time? It's kind of weird. I mean... Would his first thought be... Yeah, I can't... Yeah, the timeline here. This is tough to get over because... Would someone's... So these teenagers, they're not like 5-year-olds, okay? So they are teenagers. So these early teenagers, these super young teenagers, go missing the night before. Is everyone's first thought that they're going to turn up murdered? Or is the thought, okay, maybe they went to a party. Maybe they got lost. So what's the worst case scenario in everybody's mind? They got lost and got hurt and maybe died. Right? I mean, what is everybody thinking? Is everybody thinking there's a murderer on the loose? Like, what's the first thought when teenagers go missing in a wooded area in the woods? They either went to go party or they got lost. Is anybody really thinking the most likely scenario is that there's a killer on the loose? So why would Ron Logan need an alibi? Because even if they got lost and got hurt and possibly died somehow and it's not murder, why would he need an alibi? And why would he think that he would even need an alibi? Because what if they were at a party and they came back and everything was fine? Why is he requesting an alibi? 4, as with Keegan Kline and other suspects, DNA must have not matched, or the DNA is too tainted to use, or they don't have the killer's DNA. 5, the text messages and phone call the day of the murders is interesting and seems the text provided more exact locations. The phone call could possibly act as an alibi if there was an exact location. Assumes Ron Logan couldn't get from his house to the bridge in roughly 4 minutes. Does anyone know how cell service is on the trail? But they said that Ron Logan's cell phone did ping in the area, which puts him in the area at the time of the abduction, approximately. Unless someone stole Ron Logan's phone and dressed up as Ron Logan. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird. I mean, would a 77-year-old, even if he's a domestic violence abuser, whatever, would he just randomly decide to kill people? And put their bodies on his own property? And knowing himself, I mean, he's 77, but, I mean, he can't be that dumb. I mean, 2017, people know you can triangulate data, GPS data from cell phones. I mean, I don't know. This is all very weird. 6, we have a better understanding of the complexity of the case. Animal hair request in warrant. See below for more on this. Ron Logan having connections to Garrett Kurtz. And possibly Tony Kline. People believing Ron Logan was capable. 7, coincidences will happen, but everything outlined in this warrant and the Keegan Kline warrant is almost too many coincidences. That's why I'm choosing to look at Ron Logan, Keegan Kline, Garrett Kurtz, and others as POIs, and understanding law enforcement needs that one piece of evidence to bring the case to a head. 8, the warrant mentioning animal hair likely confirms the past rumor. In my experience with warrants, this would not be in the boilerplate language and seems to have been added at the end of the standard list. I'll defer to Indiana attorneys whether it's standard in this part of the state. 9, don't make too much of the request for pictures, videos, cameras, computer, and device evidence. This is very typical standard, and the request was made based on the agent's experience and likely staging. It does not establish a video or picture taken. Here's an interesting theory proposed by Dorkin B. What if Ron Logan led the girls down the hill where the 2 others were waiting in the brush? Would explain maybe the lack of struggle and screaming, as it was almost a surprise as they got down there. Ron Logan just kept on his way to his property and inside while the perpetrators did their thing. It's a reach, but just trying to think outside the box, I guess. So would that be Ron Logan on the video? Would that be Ron Logan's voice?
Down the hill. 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 Down the hill.
And yet he was not the one who physically murdered them, but he knew about it. Also, another interesting point that people have made a big deal about in the past is who could walk that sketchy bridge, the Manon High Bridge, with their hands in their pockets and not a care in the world. Would it be the guy that lived right there, that had made that walk so many times, so many years? He could literally do it with his hands in his pockets and his eyes closed. I mean, I don't think enough has been mentioned about that. Who would be more comfortable walking that bridge than Ron Logan? I mean, maybe one of the flannel shirt guy. One of the guys that, people that walk the trail every single day. But if we're gonna, Ron Logan's right there. How many times, does anybody know how many times Ron Logan has crossed that bridge? Some people reference that Tony Klein might have possibly hunted on Ron Logan's property before, but that has not been confirmed. So, if the true perpetrators or murderers are friendly with Ron Logan, and Ron Logan, I don't know, maybe Ron Logan didn't know that they were going to kill the girls. If someone paid Ron Logan money, they were just going to rough him up, either in connection to Derek German's drug business or not. If Liberty German was planning on going to the police with some kind of information, either on Keegan Klein, whatever, if Keegan and his father, or Kurtz, Ashley Garth, whoever, if they were just going to rough up the girls, and maybe Ron Logan is okay with that. Maybe Ron Logan's not okay with killing people, but he's okay with roughing up teenagers for a certain percentage of money. Maybe they even weren't going to rough them up. Maybe they were just going to scare them, and that's what they told Logan. Things went horribly wrong. The perpetrators could have theoretically went into Logan's house, right, and got cleaned up. Possibly. Or if they had that car in the driveway on the other side, which nobody really talks about anymore, that driveway there, they could have just got in the car with bloody clothes and nobody saw that, went somewhere else, did a really good cleanup job. Or maybe they did use the inside of Logan's house. What is he going to say? No? Because then they're going to implicate him. And that would also explain why he wouldn't blow the whistle on them. Okay, so let's round this out with the most damning piece of info and more details. So the time that Ron Logan called his cousin was 9:20 a.m. on February 14th, so a number of hours before the bodies were found. So this is a post by Calm Yourself, Iago. The part that gets me. I agree with people who are saying we should not get carried away with the newly revealed document concerning Ron Logan. With that said, there is one single piece of evidence, piece of the document that has me thinking more than anything else. I'll describe that thought below. Please help me out if anything I say is incorrect. Ron Logan contacted his cousin by phone 9:20 a.m. February 14th. This was the day after the murder and hours before their bodies were discovered. During this phone call, he asked his cousin to lie to police by telling them that he came to his house on February 13th between 2 and 2:30 p.m. to drive him to an aquarium store. What is disturbing to me is the specificity of the time range that Logan instructed his cousin to tell the police. In my mind, this is the best evidence that Ron Logan was involved in this crime. If Ron Logan was not involved, how would he know to cover his ass within the literal 30-minute window of the murder that took place 1,400 feet from his property, allegedly? I am not convinced that he did the actual killings, but I now believe at the very least he knew about the murders and was directly connected to them. I know he didn't want to get jammed up with the parole violation, but it doesn't show how he knew to be covered from 2 to 2:30 p.m. on the day of the crime. It also seems like the police and or FBI were deeply concerned by this as well. With all that said, I think law enforcement's best bet is finding a connection between Ron Logan and the Kleins. I also still don't think that Kurtz and Garth need to be let off the hook here. I mean, they're known criminals. They're known criminals, so come on. Couple more points here. Ron Logan was supposedly questioned by law enforcement on the night of the 13th. But again, questioned how? Did you see the girls? Okay. I mean, there's missing and possibly lost girls. Why would he immediately jump? I mean, it's kind of weird. So if he knew they weren't found by 9:30 the next morning, but here's the thing, how did he know that? It's not like he would have, if they were found, it's not like there'd be this immediate bulletin. I mean, again, was everybody's first thought that they were killed? It's kind of weird. Some follow-up posts here, but the fish store receipt was for 5:21, and the footage from the dump was between 11:30 and 12 noon. The clock on the video was off, so it listed 2 times. I can't remember what they were. So why did he say between 2 and 2:30 p.m. to his cousin when his phone pinged near or around his home and the bridge around 2 p.m.? That is kind of weird. Huh. So here's another mind-shocking detail from the rumor mill. Supposedly, Ron Logan had a house guest at that time. Some other man who was having problems with his wife? Was that the rumor? So who is this guy? And then we do also, if you've checked out the witness, if you've checked out the Mr. X podcast, again, supposedly a former mayor parked his truck not too far from Ron Logan's. It would be curious if this was Logan's house guest. I don't believe it was, just due to all of this other information, but... So let's look, I mean, Obviously, we also don't know what law enforcement found or didn't find in his house and other information they have. Is it possible they knew more than one individual was involved, so they wanted to lull Logan by so-called announcing that he was cleared, if that was true? I mean, that's been reported in numerous places, but because they wanted to see any kind of activity with other individuals, monitoring his phone activity, eyes on him to see if he interacted with the other guilty parties. An interesting post here by Upbeat Business, 3371. There are too many similarities between Ron Logan and Bridge Guy to dismiss. Exact same build. Ron Logan is seen wearing several items during his TV interviews that are almost identical to Bridge Guy's clothes. Same color hat with the same dent in the same place. His shoes are very similar as well. His jacket looks almost exactly like what Bridge Guy was wearing, and he even had the collar flipped up a bit like Bridge Guy. His jeans are almost identical as well. Even Ron Logan's walk and the limp. It's actually creepy. The more I watch the interviews very closely and then go back and closely watch Bridge Guy videos, even his voice is very similar. Could it all be coincidence, also given the fact he lied about his whereabouts and asked someone to lie for him to cover the exact time frame that the murders took place? I'd bet everything I have it was Ron Logan after seeing all of this. I mean, the only thing, again, that doesn't make sense to me is why would he do it right on his property? I mean, and why would he put the bodies there? The only way he would do... I mean, is he really that up there in age that this was a bucket list type of thing and he didn't care if he got caught for it? I mean, is that a possibility? How often do people in their late 70s just decide to become a murderer because they don't care at that point? Or they think they're going to die. I mean, supposedly he was in good health, though, so that doesn't make sense. Because if he's in that good health and good shape, I mean, why? There's something that doesn't make sense here, which is why I introduced the McGuire theory, where regardless of his level of involvement, someone else... Did he have a feeling somebody would implicate him? Not necessarily that they were going to stage the bodies on his property, though. Maybe he didn't believe they were going to do that, but he believed that they would blow the whistle on him, which is why he's setting up the alibi. He would obviously also know the lay of the land extremely well. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If the girls were really killed inside a building, that would definitely muffle a lot of sound. Someone posted this regarding why the cousin finally broke their silence on the alibi. Here's an interesting post by FT Throwaway 123. Cousin probably realized the severity of the situation and either had a moral crisis or was afraid to be dragged into a murder investigation, or maybe both. I don't know if it's my own brother, father, husband, son, etc. If someone I know was being investigated for murdering 2 children, and their bodies were found on his property, and he asked me to give him an alibi for the specific window of time which they were murdered, which he somehow knew before the bodies were ever found, I'm telling the police the truth. I couldn't live with myself having any part of covering something like that up. And that's a good point. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the cousin. What are they thinking? This guy asked them for an alibi for the exact time that would later come out as the time of the alleged abduction and murder, and the bodies end up being on his property. I mean, what are you thinking if you're the cousin here? So what does everybody make of all of this new information of Ron Logan as a piece of the puzzle here? How do the Kleins fit in? How does Kurtz and Garth fit in? Does Chadwell figure into this? Because Chadwell, out of all the POIs, it's possible he's the least involved, right? Just based on all the information. I mean, even if he did happen to camp out in the area, compared to all of these other people, it seems like the stack of evidence against them are much greater than Chadwell or some of these other individuals. I'm still going to go over them. They've been requested. There's a few with some ties, but next to the Kleins and Logan, it just, and Kurtz and Garth, it seems like the pieces are there for them much more than others, but again, we don't know. Some people believe it's gonna, when this is finally solved, it's gonna turn out to be somebody not named and completely under the radar. And we'll see. Hopefully this thing gets solved very, very soon, and the awareness is kept up. As always, if you find the Mindshock podcast interesting and informative, want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. And make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast, depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Delphi Murders case series. This is episode 36, Running in Circles. We will be examining what people close to the case have to say, and there's so many different theories regarding what law enforcement knows or doesn't know. There's a camp that believes basically law enforcement, they know who did it. They have a certain amount of evidence. They're just securing more evidence to make the arrest, to make sure they can get that conviction. Then there's another camp that believes law enforcement are completely incompetent. They don't know anything. They don't know what they're doing. They're completely clueless, have zero clue who did this. And it's kind of weird, too, because in a lot of cases, this kind of divide, I mean, these are polar opposites. In most cases, law enforcement probably have something. They have some kind of evidence. They might have some kind of suspicions in the direction of certain people. And incompetent or not, they might not have enough evidence, whatever. But this kind of polar divide is a little bit unique, particularly in a case like this where seemingly there's quite a bit of evidence. There's quite a bit of evidence of various kinds. Now, depending on how much of it was staged, some people believe the video itself was kind of planted on the phone and it's all a red herring. I mean, that would explain certain things, but either way, there's so much polarization in the case. We will be examining whether it is really just all running in circles or not, and where to go from here. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, want to help support Mindshock, want to help keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. So the first thing we're going to look at is actually Liberty German's mother, Carrie Timmons, and her statements regarding law enforcement as per May 2022, last month. So this is an article from wishtv.com by Demi Johnson, posted May 26, 2022. The mother of one of the girls murdered in Delphi 5 years ago said she has lost faith in law enforcement. Liberty German's mom, Carrie Timmons, is making the statement 1 week after iTeammate revealed stunning new details in the case. And these revelations are relating to Ron Logan and the FBI search warrant that we went over in the previous episode. But continuing on here, last week, iTeammate, with the help of the Murder Sheet podcast, was the first to share documents that publicly describe the scene where Abby and Libby were murdered, what was taken from the scene, and potential early suspect in the case. They don't know what they're doing still. They're kind of just circling around the same thing, and there's not really been a lot of movement in the case, Timmons said. Timmons says she wants to know why law enforcement never told her family about two people they were looking into as possible early suspects in the murders. It's weird, that all this information just now comes out and they act like it's no big deal. So I don't know how important it is to the actual case, but it seems there's a lot more information out there than what we know, Timmons said. In December 2021, iTeammate was the first to uncover the 2017 investigation into Keegan Kline. He's the man behind the Anthony Schatz profile that police said Libby was communicating with the day the girls went missing. News 8 also reported about the request for a search warrant on the property of Ronald Logan, where the girls' bodies were found. Timmons said despite disturbing details in the search warrant, including the part where an FBI agent said the girls' bodies were moved and staged, she doesn't believe Logan was the killer. If they had a case against him, they would have built it, but they had easy access to do so. I mean, I've never really believed Ron Logan did it, and I have said maybe he knows who did, or he knew information because it was there on his property, Timmons said. Timmons also says she has asked Superintendent Doug Carter of the Indiana State Police to fill in the gaps, but she says so far that hasn't happened. She says she even looked to sources from outside of Indiana for help. Doug Carter and I don't particularly see eye to eye. We never have. I mean, I've had conversations with the police. I have spoken with private investigators. But most of the people I have spoken with and private investigators have basically said there's not a whole lot they can do because police won't release information, Timmons said. At this point, Timmons says she isn't confident the case is any closer to being solved. I want to know why we still don't have answers, why we're still at a standstill 5 years later, especially knowing what we know, Timmons said. A public information officer with the Indiana State Police tells iTeammate the agency is politely declining to offer any comment. Timmons said it's important to remember no one has been arrested and sending tips remains crucial. Okay, so what does everybody make of this? Because obviously the police are not going to tell the family every little bit of info they have. However, we would have to assume that the family knows more than the public knows. I mean, in a lot of cases, obviously, the police are going to share certain things that they might not want publicly released, but they might be prepared that will be publicly released anyway. So they might give the family members a little bit more than they would the public, but obviously not 100% of what they know. So Carrie Timmons seemingly is making these statements from a position of more knowledge than the average Joe Schmo on the internet or the public, and obviously less knowledge than the investigators in the case. So what do we make of all of this information? So she believes everything is at standstill. She doesn't see eye to eye with Doug Carter. They're not releasing anything. This actually reminds me kind of the case, the Jennifer Kessie case, for those who are following. The family actually had to sue the police to get all of the records released so that they could actually move the case forward because the police weren't doing anything. So, how many years, what's the appropriate amount of years or decades before families should have access to all of the police files? So, in the Kessie case, I don't know when they initiated the lawsuit, but the lawsuit was settled after 13 years since she went missing. So I don't know how many years in did they finally sue. Oh, actually, I found it here. So 2018 they sued. So after 12 years they sued, and within a year or so, they gave the family access to 16,000 pages of records. So presumably not 100%, but a large chunk, a possible majority chunk of all the information on the case. So how many years or decades is it appropriate for family members to gain access to all police records if they're not actually solving the case? You see these other cases of murders and missing persons cases where there's police updates and such where they're clearly stating they have solid leads. They're doing, there's some kind of movement in the case that means something. Whereas with Delphi, it's almost a complete shut. I mean, it's very cryptic. I mean, they released this bizarre, conflicting information early on. There's 2 sketches. There's a video of Bridge Guy who may or may not have been cleared. I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, I mean, it's really rough, this saga of the Delphi case. Obviously a tragic case for the murders of these young teens, but on a whole nother level, just the handling of the case is tragic in and of itself because, I mean, this many years on, this is the modern era also. It's not like this happened 30, 40 years ago where things moved possibly a little bit slower, not quite the technology. I mean, this is crazy. Video, audio evidence, supposedly a highly populated area at the time of the crime in broad daylight. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. By all accounts, if you just, again, I bring this up all the time, if you're writing a script for Hollywood or something, with these kind of parameters, no one would believe, it would get rejected because it's just not feasible to pull off this kind of crime without getting caught under these parameters. And when you add in, thermal imaging drones and people previously searching the exact area, both sides of the creek. Now, one commenter actually brought up that they were so deeply covered by mud and leaves, etc., that they weren't spotted. So literally, this person is saying, now again, I'm not saying they're wrong here. There's a lot of goofs out there that hallucinate that I'm stating something is true or untrue. I mean, can it get any more clear with the motto of this podcast? The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I mean, can that be made any clearer? I'm not pushing any theory. I'm not stating anything is true or untrue. And all these goofs getting triggered, hallucinating that I can be disagreed with in some kind of fashion. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. This isn't rocket science, people. So again, I am not stating that this person's theory is false. They just put forth a theory in the comment section. I don't have it up in front of me right now, but basically that the thermal imaging drone did not pick them up because there was so much. I mean, I don't know how much it would have to be, like a foot or 2 feet of mud and leaves and twigs, and just for them to be completely submerged down into the earth to not be picked up. But here's the thing, how long does it take to do that? And that area is clearly visible from, I mean, this is the winter time, so there's no leaves on the trees. That area is pretty clearly visible. So if somebody was rummaging around doing this, not to mention the screaming and all of that would have been heard, not to mention, the time frame. I mean, there's people walking that bridge and those trails. So it's not like this was a super bitter cold day where there was literally nobody out, where it'd make it a little bit more plausible, possibly. But there were documented people on those trails before and after these alleged murders, the alleged time these murders occurred. So if somebody totally submerged them into the bank, I mean, this person is also stating that the bodies are visible from the helicopter footage. Not that they're visible, but that where they are is visible. Like the area that they're covered up is visible, as well as in all these other photos. I mean, it's really weird. It doesn't look like it to me. So what I would say is, what about the area surrounding that? Like if an individual were to cover up the bodies in this fashion, wouldn't they leave tracks of their own? Like if they're trudging right up and down the creek and around I mean, shouldn't there be more disturbance around that area if that was done? Because otherwise, how would they magically have been able to do that without leaving any kind of disturbances of their own? So it's weird. I mean, again, I don't know I don't know what this poster is alleging, the fashion in which it was done. I understand the theory, and obviously, if they were deep enough into the mud with enough, like, I don't know. Again, this would have to be experimented upon, like how much would block. Obviously, throwing a couple of leaves and branches over is not going to block any heat signature. But if they're dug into the mud of the bank pretty far, like, I don't know, a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, that would theoretically block the thermal imaging drone, the sensor, from seeing them. So, and how easy would it be for one guy to do that as well? I mean, so are there still multiple people involved with this theory or not? Either way, that's one possible theory. And so they're so the area was searched and directly walked by. So does that mean that the individual that was turning people away from where they were ultimately found, so were they moved? So if they were submerged in this mud and leaves and branches, like a foot or two of this debris and mud, how far away were they? Because if they were staged, so were they staged the day after? So they were taken from where, and they were propped up against trees or whatever the rumors stated. I don't know if that's true either, but so they were moved from where they were submerged to a different area? And that area where they were ultimately found, was the person turning searchers away? They were turning them away from an area that was being staged and prepped for the bodies to be put there later? Is Is that what happened? Again, I'm just asking questions here. I'm not hallucinating that I know anything is true or untrue. I wasn't there. I'm not hallucinating likelihoods where this is more or less likely. Because again, hindsight's 2020, of course. I mean, anyone claiming something is more or less likely, they're just hallucinating unless they know what happened and they know all of the variables and all of the factors in order to accurately assess the likelihoods, which of course can't be done when there's too much missing information. You can't assess those likelihoods. So that's why this case is so tragic, and it's just unlike any other case, which is of course why so many people follow it and so many people are eagerly waiting for truth and justice to be served in this case. But going back to Carrie Timmons' points here, her feelings are that this is all just kind of running in circles with nothing being done. So either due to police incompetence or being blocked by whatever. Again, some people believe the FBI is already investigating corruption before these murders occur, and there's some kind of overlap here with existing prior corruption. Some people think it goes all the way back to the Florida fire, or possibly even farther than that. There's some overlapping individuals here in law enforcement and political circles. Some people allege there's child trafficking connections. The coincidence theorists, of course, hallucinate that that's not possible because they're completely ignorant of FBI head Ted Gunderson and all of his exposés going back quite a few years now on human and child trafficking within political and law enforcement circles. So clearly this is going on. Now, whether it's going on here in Delphi, I mean, I don't know about that. That would have to be proven, of course. But is that what the FBI were there looking to prove? Is that what they were doing? Is there some kind of overlap and that's what's being blocked there? Or is local law enforcement totally competent and they're not only getting closer and closer to solving the Delphi case every day, but they're also getting this ring of child predators and other criminals and in overlapping the drug trade, all these different criminals, they're also going to be shutting all of them down. So it's kind of like a 10 birds, 1 stone situation where it kind of makes sense for them to drag the timeline along, for lack of better phrasing there, because they're being able to get so many criminals. Or is that just a side effect or byproduct of them going after the Delphi murder without knowing who they are, but they are uncovering all this other crime along the way, and they're taking advantage of that and getting these criminals prosecuted properly in their search for the killer? Is that what's going on, and that's why it's making it appear like everything's just going in circles? Or is it like Carrie Timmons feels, where it's just literally going in circles? They're not any closer than they were in the first week or two. Now, I do bring up this article from the Washington Post, the likelihood of arrest. So the majority of cases that are solved, an arrest is made within 10 days. So this study examined 25 major U.S. cities since 2007, and arrests were made within 10 days of the killing. And then there's an exponential drop. The same day, the highest likelihood is within the same day or within several days. And basically, if it's not done within 10 days, the likelihood just drops so substantially. So can we extrapolate that here, or just because there's this amount, there's video evidence, audio evidence, supposedly partial DNA evidence? I mean, Hatta's obviously no two cases are equal. So in cases where there perhaps is not this much evidence, perhaps that's more accurate. But in other cases where there's a plethora of evidence, perhaps there's a little bit more flexibility on making arrests. So, yeah, I mean, we do have to keep that in mind. The final point I want to go over in this podcast here is cell phone data, because I have not specifically addressed this. I have brought up the satellite imaging. Obviously, anything in the past 2 decades should be covered pretty extensively. I mean, just about every inch of every major populated area in North America is covered by satellite surveillance. I've talked about that in the past many times. I did a whole episode on satellites. I'm not going to go too far into it now, but I will go into cell phone data. So here's the thing. Obviously, they can get warrants and all of this for persons of interest or suspects to get their cell phone data, like Ron Logan's cell phone apparently was in the area of the bridge in the time in question, which is very suspicious, because why is his phone right around the Mononhigh Bridge when Abby and Libby are suspected to have been, at minimum, abducted, if not abducted and murdered shortly after the abduction? But the time in question is a time when Ron Logan's cell phone is pinging in that area, in the area of his property and the bridge. I don't know if anybody's ever adequately explained that. If somebody's looking to frame him, did they wear his clothes? Did they steal his cell phone? That way it all matched up. I don't know. Did they plant, is that video footage there from a different day of Bridge Guy? And it is Ron Logan, but that's not the person on the bridge that on that day? I mean, again, there's a lot of different variables here, but let's move all that aside for a second. I don't know the legalities of this, so I'm not stating this would be legal because you would need a warrant, but is it possible, and maybe this was already done, is it possible that all of the cell phone data, is it possible to get the information on every single cell phone that was in the area of the Mononhigh Bridge within a certain couple hour span? Unless Bridge Guy didn't have his phone on him or had like all the tracking and everything completely disabled, or if it was like even if it was a burner phone, I guess that wouldn't help if he bought it in cash. If it was some crappy cheapo burner phone, I guess that wouldn't help. But again, depending on how intelligent of a criminal we have here, because there's so many theories. Again, the level of polarization in the Delphi case is unlike anything we have seen in any other case. Literally, there's a complete opposite end of the spectrum theory for literally everything. Some people think Bridge Guy's an experienced serial killer. Other people think he's just this incompetent buffoon who just got so freaking lucky. And yeah, and everything and anything in between. So if he had his cell phone on him and it was his actual cell phone, his primary use cell phone, is it possible that law enforcement actually do have every single cell phone that was in or around the bridge and the trails that particular day in the time in question? If it was several hundred people, it was several hundred people that can go down the list. Now, if Bridge Guy didn't have any cell phone of any kind on him, obviously that wouldn't help. But just another point I wanted to bring up, I don't know if anybody's talked about that extensively. What are the chances that Bridge Guy had his actual phone on him? In which case, it could theoretically be a simple process of elimination there. And then also combine that with the satellite info, of course, all the satellite imagery. I mean, it's just, it's kind of mind-boggling how people just do not spend enough attention on that. I've brought up I've suggested a government agency that, to investigate murders and missing persons who is above all the other agencies, so they would be able to get NSA data and all of this other agency data for the purpose of solving the case, and only for that purpose. I mean, I think less people would have, I mean, obviously you'd have to trust the government to do it. If this was a non-government group, if it was just like a group run by private citizens, I guess it probably would have more support, because then there wouldn't be the constitutional violations of privacy, etc. But the point I'm making with that is the technology clearly exists to solve way more missing persons and murder cases than has been used for such. I don't know how anybody can disagree with that, but there's a lot of goofs out there, so maybe we'll get a couple of messages, some comments and messages of people who also disagree with that. The one thing you can count on with a true crime podcast is Dunning-Kruger goofs coming out of the woodwork to dispute each and everything stated in each and every podcast ever on every single side of every issue, even if I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue regarding the actual theories here. Obviously, the satellite technology exists. I mean, I don't know if there are deniers. I mean, even the flat earthers, I don't think they would deny that there's high altitude planes or satelloons or whatever. There's camera technology in the sky. You can debate exactly how high it is. You can debate a lot of things, but clearly there is some kind of imaging technology, some high resolution imaging technology in the sky, surveying every single major inhabited area in North America, if not most of the world. I think that's been made clear enough. So that's it for now. Are we really running in circles in the Delphi case? There's a couple more issues I haven't gone over. Some possible more smoking guns. So, yeah, big shout out and big thanks to all the internet sleuths out there, to all the Mindshock listeners, to everybody out there keeping up awareness in the pursuit of truth, justice, and closure in all of these tragic cases, murder cases, missing persons cases, and otherwise. If you find the podcast interesting and informative, want to help support Mindshock, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to Mindshock True Crime. This is the Delphi Murders case series, episode 37, The Cemetery Party. We are diving deep into local rumors of a party at the cemetery that might have had something to do with the deaths of Liberty German and Abigail Williams. Some believe they were even attendees of this said party, and the entire timeline is off, and that's why this case has not been solved. This and plenty more mind-shocking information coming up next. If you enjoy Mindshock, find it interesting and informative, want to help support the podcast, want to help us keep up awareness in not only this case, but other cold cases, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Share the podcast. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. Alright, so I actually have not seen this discussed at length anywhere. I do not follow every single true crime researcher online, so perhaps there are podcasts out there that covered this and it was discussed at length. I haven't seen it. I've only seen little bits and pieces alluding to this mysterious party. Some believe it was actually at Ron Logan's house. And some are alleging that Abigail Williams' mother was actually pretty good friends with Ron Logan. In which case, Abby and possibly Libby would have also recognized Ron Logan specifically. Now, again, there was that little bit of info that Liberty German was warned or yelled at about trespassing regarding properties around the Monon High Bridge. And some people believe that has something to do with something. Again, this is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. So, there were some comments made here. I don't know where they were derived from. Is this local rumor? I don't know. This is not a 100% verified fact. So, for all the triggered goofs out there that are just obsessed with only discussing 100% hardcore verifiable facts, which is almost nothing in this case. I mean, I don't know what they're doing listening to podcasts or any of this. I mean, if that's all they're obsessed with, they can just read newspaper articles. I mean, there's no reason to go on true crime podcast, listen to true crime podcasts, particularly podcasts that are theorizing about several different theories, many of them mutually exclusive, in the interest of keeping up awareness and finding the truth. Einstein allegedly once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Why did he say that? Because if you don't spitball, if you don't brainstorm, how do you find answers that are not already available? This isn't rocket science. There's a certain process, a process involving hypotheses and theories. Some of them may have some evidence. Hypotheses might not have any evidence at all. You're kind of throwing something at the wall to see what sticks. In cases that are as of yet unsolved, there are so many missing pieces. Theorizing is most often done without 100% verifiable facts, because again, the case has not been solved. I can't believe I actually just had to go over that, just for all the Dunning-Kruger goofs out there who just get triggered at anybody theorizing anything. It's just really weird, but there's a lot of goofs out there, so whatever. I'm sure they'll continue to comment even after that. But here is a comment from user Stop Selling Dogs. Posted this. I think there was a long weekend party at the cemetery and the park and drugs were involved. I think Libby's sleepover was a cover for sneaking out and going. And then being lured back. Tweakers on day 3 are maniacs. Lots of people were there. Ron knew. Rumors was there was a pig roast on his property, but thinking the drug use would have been down past the creek into parkland. I think he was asked by Mr. X to help cover up. Just my opinions, but also Bridge Guy was Ron Logan, and he was investigated by the FBI and was their suspects. The statements in the warrant aren't fabricated, they are facts. They reached the conclusion based on all of it. Ron Logan had time to clean the scene, help stage, or whatever. Immediately after the incident, I imagine the girls were removed, alive or not, taken somewhere to hide them until later that night, after police called off the search, and then dumped. I suspect law enforcement and other government, like firefighters, as well as neighbors, are all aware and were there at the time. Small town, all the POIs are connected together. Law enforcement, government, firefighters, maybe even family. We don't know. If this is true, we need a guest list. Wow, did this just open up Pandora's box? Because if there's a party, a possible multi-day drug party, if it involves the cemetery, if it involves the CPS building, some of these government officials, does it overlap with other criminals and traffickers who maybe were not even looking to directly traffic Libby or Abby? And there was just some kind of drug use going on and there was some kind of accident or whatever. If it can be established that there was some kind of long weekend party at the cemetery here, and then again this rumored pig roast on Ron Logan's property, and then of course Ron Logan had that house guest, allegedly, had the house guest on his property, which nobody knows anything about. So when Ron Logan was going to the dump, the fish store, the bar, whatever, what was his house guest doing? I mean, these are all unanswered questions. Again, this is all hypothesizing and theorizing. I am not a local. I wasn't there. I don't know. And unless somebody was, they don't know either. They can hallucinate and pretend to know, but nobody knows what was going on at that time unless they were there. So if there is some kind of party with drug users and all of this, I mean, people have long speculated there's something extremely wrong with the timeline, particularly the day before. Like, what's going on with the sleepover? Where are these girls exactly? Are they sneaking out, sneaking back in? I mean, can all their movements be 100% accounted for the previous 24 hours? Or even 48 hours? I mean, you would think law enforcement would do it, but if the grandparents are basically saying, oh yeah, they were in the room or whatever, do they know that for sure? I mean, come on now. Teenagers sneak out at night. Teenagers sneak out and go to parties. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody out there that's denying that teenagers do that. Now, did these two particular teenagers do that? We don't know that information. Again, unless somebody had eyes on them that night, you don't know what they did. I mean, how often have teenagers snuck out of the house when their parents would swear they were still in their bedroom? And then they sneak back in the next day, nobody's the wiser. I mean, seriously, are we dealing with millions of incidents here? I mean, all the Mindshock listeners can chime in here. How many teenagers have snuck out of the house to go to a party and the parents were none the wiser? And maybe they did get caught once or twice. How many times did they not get caught? I mean, these are the important questions here when you're establishing controls, when you're trying to figure something out. You can't just hallucinate, oh no, that's far-fetched. A lot of goofs do that. Far-fetched, long shot, unrealistic. There's a lot of goofs out there. But that, I mean, yeah, so if Ron Logan is having some kind of pig roast party, Mr. X is there, other locals are there, I mean, what do they know? And this also opens the door to those satanic theories that a lot of goofs like to poo-poo, as if there are no Satanists in the world, and if they never have parties at cemeteries ever, and they never do drugs. Obviously they do. Is that what happened here? We don't know. I am not hallucinating to no likelihoods. I am not saying it is or isn't likely. I'm not saying it did or didn't happen. But if there's any truth to these rumors, I mean, that really opens the door for a lot of weird satanic possibilities. Another post here, you say nothing about Greeno, who was there on the 13th. With his words, said Abby was killed much later, about 12 at night. Okay, I mean, we're going into real Mindshock land here. Again, trigger warning for all the goofs who can only listen to words on law enforcement reports. I mean, this is clearly not for them. So, apparently, Anthony Greeno, again, a highly controversial figure in the Delphi case. I mean, this supposed local who knew a lot of these people, directly connected to a lot of these people, and this allegation is that he was there on the 13th, and he stated Abby was killed later, 12 at night. So some responses to this comment here. The party on Sunday night the 12th at Ron Logan's. The people who attended this party is the connection to what happened the next day. RAG, MB, JP, CM, GK, AG. Kurtz told Open Secrets about 14 people who were involved with the murders. Alright, so if there is some kind of meth ring or drug connections here with other criminals, if they're also present at this mysterious party, which may or may not have been on Ron Logan's, which may or may not have also been taking place at the cemetery or possible other locations throughout the park there. I mean, this is some bizarre stuff. I mean, I'm going to throw in one of my anecdotes. I mean, I rarely do this, but it made me think of it. So, again, to all the goofs out there who think there's zero satanic or drug activity in parks, I mean, I was hiking at a park where not even that far from a major road. It was pretty close to a major road, and basically just going off trail for maybe just a few minutes. And there was an area where it looked like, I mean, nobody was there at the time, but it kind of looked like a small homeless camp. There was drug paraphernalia and some satanic paraphernalia. I mean, it was kind of weird. Again, as far as I know, no crimes ever took place there. This was nowhere near Indiana. I mean, so it's... Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't really make anything of it. I mean, if these are teens just screwing around, I mean, obviously this was more popular, I guess, in the 90s. I mean, there were teens doing animal sacrifices out deep in the woods. I mean, Satanic Panic started, somewhere around that time, 80s, early 90s, something like that. And again, not to say that it has any connection with any real crimes. I mean, what are they going to be charged with? Vandalism? I mean... whatever. But, and in the case of Delphi here, even if there was a party at Ron Logan's, and even if there was a party in the cemetery with some drug-using Satanists, that doesn't mean they had anything to do with the deaths of Liberty or Abby German at all. And even if Libby and Abby were present at the party, that still doesn't mean that their deaths are connected to the party or the druggy Satanists. The DWBs. Let's keep that in mind. Let's not fall for these false dichotomies here. So, even if this is all true, that doesn't necessarily mean it's directly linked to their deaths. So, another response here. Did the police round up all these people, scan their cell phones, check tower pings? Why was this old man having a party? And if so, why is he having a party with young devil-worshipping people, if that's what happened? I could see having people over to watch sports, maybe. He was drinking Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. When did his stepson die? I really think this is someone in town who knew school was going to be out and who was familiar with the Logan property. Drugs, drinking, porn, and murder. That's a lot. Also, was there a porn ring and a drug ring? Somebody is going to be getting a very light prison sentence when they bust the person out who did this. Just wait. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is getting real crazy. And not to appeal to incredulity, I'm not saying crazy as in untrue, just crazy as in if any of this is true. Is that why people are so quiet about this? Because let's say you were a neighbor in that area and you attended this satanic drug party. Would you admit it? And then if Abby and Libby were there, would you admit that? And again, maybe this isn't some drug satanic worshiping party. Maybe this is just a regular party with some high school age kids or whatever, school age kids. And they're just trying to be cool and partying and whatever. No hard drugs. I mean, what does that mean? How innocuous is that? What connections are here? I mean, if certain people knew other people were at this party, and even if this party has nothing to do with the deaths of Libby and Abby, I mean, what are the chances a serial killer just comes across them the day after this party? But why would they specifically want to go back to the bridge if there was a party there previously? I mean, unless it's just the most popular hangout spot ever, and all these people are just going there all the time anyway, so that's establishing controls. But if they don't normally go there, I mean, that is kind of weird. The other thing's kind of weird is, I went over this in previous episodes, the spot under the bridge. Like, there was a known party spot under the bridge where teens did go to drink and possibly do drugs, whatever, just like a hangout spot. There's even photos of, like, beer bottles there when I went over this in the previous episode. I mean, how much does that have to do with anything? I don't know. Here's the final theory here regarding all these rumors and parties. An astute Mindshock listener threw out this theory, which is interesting to say the least. I also think maybe they were out partying all night with people their own age when trying to get across the bridge to get home, and they were horsing around and Libby fell. When they all ran down, Abby freaked out and they hurt her, hushing her up, then staged it to look like something else. I don't know if that's, she wrote here, Gabby. I don't know who Gabby is. Gabby or Abby? So, okay, let's look at this theory. So, if there's an accidental death or two, would druggies or even non-druggy teenage kids, possibly early 20s, in a panicked stupor, would they plant video of, like, let's say they did see whoever bridge guy is, they filmed him. Let's say there was an altercation previously about getting yelled at for trespassing, and then the altercation was over. It's over. And then this accident happened however many hours or even days later, and someone planted that on the phone to make it appear like it was that day. Or are law enforcement just that dumb they assumed the incidents were connected? Because let's say chronologically, the video timestamp, metadata, it all matches up. So, but they didn't die there at that time. They left or were taken elsewhere or were even at one of the neighbors' houses for however many hours. Then they're killed later, but law enforcement, for whatever reason, thinks they were killed immediately after the video. And is it possible that Bridge Guy in the video has nothing to do with their deaths? Because if that's just them getting hassled by Ron Logan or someone else for being on the bridge is dangerous. Because, I mean, if Abby's mother really is friends with Ron Logan, did Ron Logan feel a responsibility for telling them to get off the bridge? I mean, and that's it. Ron Logan had nothing to do with anything other than getting them off the bridge and telling them not to go on the bridge again. And that concludes his involvement. Or if a bridge guy is not Ron Logan, that concludes bridge guy's involvement. So despite what police say for whatever reason, again, if something happened, let's say it was an accidental death, and then it was made to look like murder after the fact, or even if it was murder, if that's all after the fact involving individuals that law enforcement want to protect, would law enforcement concoct a narrative and try to blame a guy on their phone, the guy on the phone? Maybe they're trying to blame Ron Logan even. What if they knew the whole time that the incident with the bridge down the hill, don't trespass, what if they knew that was all not connected to their deaths? And this is just being used as an intentional red herring. Or if they don't know, did they really get duped by some kids who just planted that on the phone as a red herring to cover up something else? Because again, a lot of coincidence theorists, like, they, for some reason, they hallucinate that everything always goes according to plan. Because criminals could have their plans changed like 5 times. If there was some kind of accidental death or near death, injuries, whatever, they didn't want to get in trouble. If there was somebody criminal minded amongst them, would a plan be hatched to, okay, well, let's just sell them to human traffickers now? Because we can't ever let them go back because we're responsible for whatever happened. Is that a possibility? Again, I'm not saying it's true or not true. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is we don't know anything for sure. I am not hallucinating that this is a high likely situation. I'm not hallucinating any likelihood whatsoever. We're simply going over all different possibilities because this is Mindshock. If that triggers listeners to theorize and utilize thinking abilities instead of just reading a news report and only discussing verbatim what's in the news report, then this is clearly not the podcast for you. But in theorizing and thinking outside the box, which needs to be done for some of these unsolved cases, if it was that clear-cut and that easy, why is this case not solved? I mean, that's a big question there. But what does everybody make of these rumors of a party at Ron Logan's? And again, even if the rumors are true, that doesn't even, and even if Abby and Libby were at the party, that still doesn't prove that it had anything to do with their ultimate deaths. But if there is any truth to these parties, particularly some of these satanic-themed parties at the cemetery, I mean, they don't even necessarily have to be satanic-themed. I mean, there's a certain amount of high schoolers and early 20s druggy people, or maybe just even alcohol drinkers. They like to drink and party at a cemetery and just to be edgy, and it's actually not satanic at all. So it's basically maybe not even a bonfire, just drinking at the cemetery. I mean, there's certain spots people just go to drink at. They're kind of party or hangout spots. If there was a party at the cemetery, that doesn't necessarily mean it's directly satanic connected. Now, if we do factor in Ted Gunderson and all of his research revelations and exposés on law enforcement and politicians being involved with satanic child trafficking and satanic abuse, which he blew the whistle on, that coincidence theorists hallucinate never happened. This is all public, by the way. I mean, this is all out in the open now, thanks to Ted Gunderson, former FBI head. But if it is connected to that, then of course there'd be a large criminal element. The FBI that were in the area before the murders even occurred, are they investigating law enforcement corruption? Something to do with the Flora fires and various other corruption issues? And it just so happens that these 2 particular girls end up dead, and it may have something to do with some of these satanic human traffickers and druggies. I mean, with the criminal element, I mean, it's not unusual for criminals to be involved in multiple criminal enterprises, obviously. And the higher up the ladder you go on some of these criminal rankings, the more they're involved with. So, yeah, I mean, it opens the door to a lot more theories, if any of this is true. But some of these rumors are starting to pop up more and more. Just little tidbits here and there. But all the Mindshock listeners, feel free to add your thoughts, theories regarding these parties, if they actually took place. Cemetery Park, Ron Logan. Are there neighbors involved with these parties? How much overlap is there? And does it have anything to do with the deaths of Libby and Abby? Also, if some of their family members were also involved with these parties, again, let's say they have nothing to do with their deaths, they might not necessarily want to make that public either. So, I mean, where does that leave everything with the case? So there's just a lot of information not being made public for certain reasons. The reasons could simply be embarrassment or to protect reputations. So that may or may not have anything to do with the actual crimes in question. All of these are unknowns, but this is Mindshock, where we explore all of these unknown rabbit holes, attempting to upturn every stone in the pursuit of truth and justice and closure, with logic and reason at the forefront, attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies, which of course the mainstream is known for. Nothing but fallacies there. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of Mindshock True Crime in the Delphi Murders case series. If you want to help support the podcast, help us get more mind-shocking content out there, and keep up awareness, not just in this unsolved cold case, but others, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions. You can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. And you are listening to the Delphi Murders Case Series. This is episode 38. Arrest Imminent? ? I mean, this case has more rumors than just about any other case out there. And we'll be discussing what it all means, what the timelines could potentially mean, and more. As always, if you enjoy the Mindshock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help support the channel. Help us get more mind-shocking content out there. To keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions, such as this one. This case, some believe, is a cold case, but it is an unsolved murder as of right now, cold or not. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications, like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Okay, so there are grumblings of an arrest being imminent. Now, some people believe imminent means days to weeks. Others are thinking more like months, and there have been things like, some people are stating before September. Now, again, some of this information is coming from inner circles, and again, some of these inner circles have called things accurately before, so I don't know if I'd be super quick to just dismiss their claims outright. But at the same time, I mean, this is not 100% verified information by any stretch of the imagination. And also, if an arrest is imminent, does that necessarily mean the arrest of the murderer, or does it mean an arrest of some kind of an accomplice or someone interfering with an investigation or lying to police in the form of, let's say, false alibis, etc.? It doesn't necessarily mean the murderer themselves are the ones being arrested, but an arrest in connection with the case might possibly be imminent, according to some in these inner true crime circles discussing the Delphi murders case. Again, some of this early information has been spot on. If you go back and you look at the rumors from even the first year and the months after, some of them have been quite on the ball. That's why on Mindshock, we try not to fall for these silly logical fallacies like appeal to incredulity logical fallacies or hasty generalization logical fallacies like all rumors are false and all that nonsense, because a lot of the times they're not. A lot of the times, the early rumors are pretty accurate because they came through someone close to either the investigation or people close to the investigation, whatever the case may be. And yeah, sometimes there's some broken telephone going on. Sure, a lot of times details aren't quite 100% exact, but in general, the general information brought forward did turn out to be accurate. So I don't want to completely discount this, but as I've stated before, I personally believe that this case can and will be solved. Now, unlike some of these rumors stating an arrest is imminent, I don't know how optimistic I am about an arrest being made in the incredibly short term. Because there's basically two camps here. I haven't heard, again, if you're in neither one of these camps, feel free to chime in the comment section here to give your viewpoint. But in general, this is a very polarizing case. There's two main camps. The two most vocal camps are the cops know what they're doing. They're just getting the final details to make sure the conviction will stick on the perpetrators of these gruesome crimes. The other camp is law enforcement is completely incompetent. They don't know what they're doing, and they're no closer than day one. They have no clue who did it. And those are the two most vocal camps. Now, theoretically, you would think there would be a camp in the middle where, okay, law enforcement have some evidence. They have, a few decent leads and suspects, which they're following. They're just not fully actualized yet to the point where they can know for sure who did what or know for sure to rule someone out. I mean, I don't know. again, it's just this particular camp, if it exists in a large form, seems to be the most silent, because you hear the most from people who are saying, oh, they know who did it, they just don't have enough for a conviction, etc., or they don't know anything, and they're complete bumbling Keystone Cop buffoons. So that's curious in and of itself as well. I mean, this case can definitely be a case study for a lot of different reasons. Its unusual nature just being one of these. But even if an arrest is made shortly, as I stated in the opening, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the actual murderer. And if there's multiple people involved, it might be one of them, but not the others. So it's obviously, if the arrest is legitimate, the evidence against them is legitimate, then that's obviously great and a step in the right direction. If it's not, I mean, that just opens up other cans of worms, which one can only surmise that law enforcement wanted to avoid opening in the first place, which is why no arrest has been made thus far. So what do all the Mindshock listeners out there think of these rumors? Again, comparing some of these rumors that actually ended up being on point, and obviously there were some that were not, or appear to not have been. I mean, namely, there were rumors of a pregnancy. I mean, I never really saw where those came from, because there doesn't seem to be anything definitive behind that rumor. Also, rumors that Liberty German was going to go to the police station to make some kind of statement against somebody. Now, that one, there's actually a little bit more there. You have her father, Derek German, involved in some kind of drug activity, possibly snitching on some people, like Ashley Garth, possibly resulting in her losing custody of her kids, which may or may not be a motive for some kind of retaliation. In the previous episode, we discussed the possibility of a cemetery party, or a party at Ron Logan's, or some kind of party around the bridge in the woods there may or may not involve drug or alcohol with minors. So those are all theoretical possibilities. Now, is it, again, let's not fall for false dichotomies. If Liberty German was looking to make some kind of police statement, possibly regarding some kind of online catfishing or exploitation in the direction of the clients, or maybe somebody else. Again, everybody kind of, not everybody, but some people kind of get carried away with the clients, and then they get tunnel vision with the clients. There's other scumbags out there. I mean, there's possibly in the client circle, possibly not. So it's theoretically possible there was some kind of catfish going on with other accounts as well. Law enforcement has not really released that. All we really have are the Klein situation and the Anthony Schatz account. So these early rumors, is there any truth to them? The other one that was kind of major is that the girls were killed in a barn. And now there is a barn visible from the cemetery, a red barn. I don't believe that was the one that was torn down. There's a barn, a garage, other outbuildings, rumors of all kinds. Who knows? But is there anything to that rumor? Because, again, some of these early rumors, if they came from a legitimate source, because if we're talking about not a single perpetrator here, if we're talking about a kind of circle of scumbags and criminals, I mean, they talk, they brag with each other. I mean, somebody could have overheard something or thought they did. Maybe they overheard something else, but that, again, that's how broken telephone rumors start. It may or may not be something legitimate. That's the problem. We don't know that information. Law enforcement knows whatever they know, and they also don't know what they don't know. So rumors are tricky that way. It's difficult to completely discount them, and obviously it's difficult to take them 100% at face value, but the information that we do have is a certain percentage of the time, more than zero, in a certain percentage of cases, more than zero, a lot of the early rumors actually did turn out to be true. So, regarding this latest rumor mill theory about an arrest being imminent, are these people close to the investigation and investigators who are stating that there is some kind of movement on the case? Whatever, and again, the jury's still out on why law enforcement released the Anthony Schatz info. Are some of these leaked interviews and transcripts and warrants about Ron Logan, Are these leaked on purpose? I mean, that's another point people get hung up on because it's kind of difficult to say for sure. I mean, what is law enforcement's game plan? How many people are involved? How many people are they looking to ensnare? And of course, one of the other major sticking points of the case is the role that law enforcement wants the public to play while releasing very limited information. So they're asking for help and tips, but they've released almost nothing. Like, even in the direction of the Anthony Shots account, now they want to know how many more people interacted with this account, how many people, and of course, law enforcement would have some kind of information regarding how many people had access to the account. But again, I mean, how tech savvy are some of these criminals? I mean, does Keegan Kline strike people as some criminal mastermind hacker genius? I mean, maybe he is. I don't know. He doesn't appear to be, but again, a lot of these guys might not appear to be that actually are. So we don't know. And again, a lot of people were saying, I was saying that Tony Kline does not appear to be some kind of social media hacker, internet genius. That's just my opinion. Again, I don't know the guy. I haven't seen any of his standardized test scores or any kind of whatever. If he is some kind of hacker, his hacking abilities, I haven't seen evidence of that. So I'm not saying whether he is or isn't a hacking mastermind genius. Like, from the surface, outside looking in, it appears to me subjectively that Keegan would probably be more in that area. And even still, I mean, how did they even track him? How much of a genius mastermind is he if the cops have all his info? So he doesn't have these supercomputers. He's got like a basic smartphone, a basic laptop. So perhaps this is not some kind of major hacking situation where he could cover his tracks a lot. Now, are there other individuals in his criminal circle who are much better hackers? Could they have possibly even cloned some of his devices? I mean, how would that work? Again, we need to have Johnny Mills on this podcast about this. I actually don't know. If you clone somebody's cell phone or computer, get their IP, whatever, it would appear like someone else is doing the activity you're doing. Is that how that works? Any computer hacking experts, Mindshock listeners, feel free to chime in there, because if that's the case, could it be someone in Keegan Kline's circle who kind of framed him up for all of this? And Keegan may have utilized the account and may have even talked to, I don't know, did he 100% admit that he spoke to her, to Liberty German? Or did he say he may have? Again, he was kind of tricky with his words a lot of the time, but because if he's talking to so many people, he might have not necessarily discounted that possibility, or perhaps he saw her photo in the friends or whatever. But if somebody else was using his account with or without his knowledge, I mean, it's kind of leading the direction of maybe it is with his knowledge. And if it is with his knowledge, again, that doesn't mean all these criminals are best friends who would never sell each other out. Is it possible some of these criminal scumbags are framing their so-called acquaintance friends criminal scumbags? Is that a possibility? And if Keegan knows who it might be, if there's some more powerful individuals involved here, like upper political circles, mayors, ex-mayors, who knows, Keegan Kline might not wish to point the finger at anybody. He might be perfectly willing to just sit back and let law enforcement see what they can come up with, because he's just simply not willing to open that Pandora's box. Now, we have another wrinkle in the case, which is, of course, the FBI being there allegedly before the murders. And who or what are they investigating? Because if they're aware of the corruption in the area and they're trying to get everybody, how would that all play out? So we have many, many layers here in this highly baffling case. The latest online rumor mill grumblings that an arrest is imminent. Now, again, as I started, what does imminent mean? Is it days, weeks, or is it possibly months? But I don't think anybody would say years is imminent. So if these rumors are true, then someone may be getting close to being arrested. That doesn't necessarily mean this is the main perpetrator. Perhaps this is some of the outer circle here, they've kind of like Klein. What was discussed with Klein is why he wasn't arrested at the beginning. It's kind of like they were trying to milk him for all he was worth to take down as many people as possible and get as much information as possible. Are they doing that with other individuals as well? And once those individuals have kind of exhausted their usefulness, then they'll make the arrest. Because they're tracking them, they have eyes on them. There's no necessarily danger if they're doing this all properly. And if the FBI is involved, you would think they are. So, unless, of course, some are alleging the FBI is corrupt as well, but is every single agent in the FBI corrupt? So if we're talking about one or two corrupt agents, how would other agents behave to take them down? I mean, this is all not quite as simple as the coincidence theorists would like to believe, with their false dichotomies of if this, then that, and nothing else. But this is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure, and we try not to fall for any of these silly logical fallacies. So what do all the Mindshock listeners think? Is this rumor about an arrest imminent true? If so, is this a main perpetrator, one of the main murderers, or is it some kind of tertiary acquaintance or affiliate associate of the main perpetrators that they're now going to squeeze even further by making the arrest? So in which case this investigation is nowhere close to over. Or is there anybody out there who actually believes, I mean, this is 100% going to be over within days or weeks or a month or two, and they have all the individuals responsible, arrest will be made, and it's all accounted for, the evidence is all there, possibly even a confession forthcoming? Does anybody believe that? Perhaps I'll do a poll accompanying this episode as well to see where all these true crime aficionados, what page everybody is at. For people asking me what I believe, I mean, for some reason, I don't know. I do, as I stated in a previous episode, I do believe that this case will be solved definitively. I'm not sure it's going to be incredibly quick, and I'm not sure it's going to be all wrapped up immediately. If the rumor about an arrest is true, I would think it would be more in the Keegan Kline type of arrest, except in connection with the Delphi case, but not necessarily the main perpetrator. If the Ron Logan leak was intentional, I think that might have something to do with it as well. So if we don't know if the Ron Logan leak was intentional, because is there some kind of connection with Ron Logan? Ron Logan's house guest, again, I mean, to me, this guy has to be a major person of interest. Because Ron Logan's house guest, depending on how well he knew Ron Logan, or even if not that well, he would have access to Ron Logan's clothes. He would have access to Ron Logan's cell phone if he wanted some kind of ping data to frame up Ron Logan. I mean, we also don't know the exact story. Supposedly, it's a guy who's having trouble with his wife. I think that's what was stated. Again, I'm not saying that that is true or untrue. Now, who can corroborate that? Was that a made-up story by a third party, possibly Kurtz, who grew up riding horses on Ron Logan's property? Some say he thinks of Ron Logan as an uncle. I don't know if this is meant as a blood uncle or a non-blood uncle. But Kurtz clearly, if that's all true, I mean, he knows that lane like the back of his hand. Is it possible that Kurtz knows this house guest? I think a lot more focus needs to be put on this house guest, particularly if this warrant was leaked on purpose, kind of to try to get more information in the direction of Ron Logan. Not necessarily that Ron Logan himself is the murderer or perpetrator, but there's something going on around Ron Logan. Because if somebody's looking to frame him, they have his clothes, they can have his phone, they would dump bodies on his property. And notice how his house guest is not the one he turns to for the alibi. He calls up his cousin for an alibi for the exact hours in question, which are not public at the time of his phone call. So what does everybody make of all of this? Is an arrest imminent? If so, are we talking direct murderer, the true perpetrator, or are we talking about associates or someone connected to the direct perpetrators? As I stated, I think just based on all the information and without knowing whether the leaks are on purpose or not, I would guess, if somebody forced me to guess, I would say not the direct perpetrator, but one step at a time, that would lead to the direct perpetrator, however much time after. But I remain optimistic, unlike many other people. Even if there is mass corruption, obviously only a small portion of it gets exposed, but there's just something about this case where it's just, the evidence seems to be there. There seem to be enough people that are still alive. I mean, obviously Logan has since passed, but there's plenty of other people connected to the case, and the friends and family of all the people involved, other druggies and all these other people claiming to have even seen video of the crime taking place. If those rumors are all true, I mean, it would seem like there's enough pieces of the puzzle here to really close this case out. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of Mindshock True Crime in the Delphi Murders case series. If you want to help support the podcast, help us get more mind-shocking content out there, and keep up awareness, not just in this unsolved cold case, but others, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.
If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Delphi Murders case series. This is episode 39, Unreleased Info. We're going to go over some very, very curious information, some from immediately after the murders, and other information that has not been released, and examining why it has not been released, and the nature of rumors early on, which a lot of which are actually turning out to be true and verified by police several years later. Obviously, there's a lot of eyes on the case, and a lot of goofs who aren't logical obviously hallucinate that none of the rumors can be true, despite how many keep turning up to be corroborated by law enforcement after the fact. So we're going to take that to the next level and examine possibly the most mind-shocking info yet in the Delphi case. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, find it interesting and informative, want to help support Mindshock, want to help us keep up awareness in unsolved cold cases, missing persons cases, and wrongful convictions, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that bell for notifications. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube to support the channel that way, access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So let's get right to it. This is a post by Green Caterpillar 9 months ago on the Libby and Abby subreddit, which has a fair amount of decent logical users, also a fair amount of Dunning-Kruger goofs, but every single case has that. So we're going to examine this astute post. Info not released by law enforcement, but for one reason or another has at least 70% chance of being true, and why I have keeping the info to DMs. I kept the info to DMs because I figured anyone could find the info if they weren't too lazy to spend 10 minutes on a Google search. Also, if law enforcement didn't release, I figured it wouldn't be too good to go posting it everywhere. If you expect full links and all this goes right with the lazy part I mentioned. Also, if you have any ones that I missed, not trash rumors, and there is some sort of verification, please post. 1. Dispatch recordings. There are at least two that I know of. The first saying that a man said the bodies were found, and this was before the police actually found the bodies. I'm not sure of the context or time between him doing so and the bodies being found. The second is deputies asking for evidence baggies for cigarette butts and a bra or underwear. I forgot the exact wording. The items were found in the creek. Other posts here, supposedly law enforcement got 11 markers from the touch DNA. So, user since deleted posted this. There was a citizen. Another office says they haven't gotten any reports. The first officer asks, "Are you sure?" They say yes. Then a high-ranking officer says, "I am now at the scene. Please switch all traffic to a certain channel." That's how the dispatch ends on that. There is also transcripts for the dispatches on WebSleuth. And there is audio. We actually went over this on the call. I believe it was the Weaver character involved with a statement that the bodies were found in the water. And some people are stating there were also other dispatch chatter that may have been similar to that and not exactly that. So apparently John Weaver was the civilian that said the girls' bodies were found in the water. So what more information is there? Found by whom? And then possibly moved? If so, does that mean it was citizens that moved the bodies or other officers? Now, if it were citizens that moved the body, is this why the whole scene has been contaminated to the point of no return? Because citizens found the bodies, and instead of getting officers or CSI techs, they themselves pulled the bodies to where they were ultimately processed, so to speak, by law enforcement. Is that the major problem with the case? And for whatever reason, they don't want this information to be known because the individuals that pulled the body out of the water, they're persons of interest, even though technically they might not have had anything to do with the murders. They were just in shock and awe, possibly not wanting the bodies to... I mean, again, depending on the nature of how fast that river was moving at that time, perhaps they were, I don't know, they were afraid to not move the bodies out of the water. I mean, again, I have no idea how anybody would react in that situation. But the Mindshock listeners can feel free to chime in there. Also, the chatter about the cigarette butt and the other clothing... Theoretically, that could be unrelated to this particular case. So, Green Caterpillar also posted this. The new information consisted of a partial DNA profile found on the shoulder of one of the girls' sweatshirts. Also, Libby's wrists were badly bruised, and it was implied this was due to her being dragged over 50 feet by them. Make of that what you will. Supposedly the info on the DNA markers came from a lab tech involved in law enforcement. And then, of course, Abby's mother confirmed that the leaked texts were real. Make of that what you will. We went over that before too, because again, early on, the coincidence theorists were maintaining that the leaked texts were all made up and fake. And yeah, so again, there's a lot of goofs that hallucinate to know for sure whether something is false or true when the information required to make that determination, the variables are not there to make that determination. So you wouldn't know what's true or not true. I mean, this isn't rocket science, but for whatever reason, I have to keep repeating it. I mean, there's so many goofs in the YouTube comments who just don't understand the basics here. So I just wanted to go over those couple of bits for people who were not aware. Obviously, some of that has been discussed before, but there's another bit of info here that was recently posted by Bella XO on the Libby and Abby subreddit as well. Interesting post from 5 years ago, hiding in plain sight. So this was posted by You to Kill Me. The letter U, the number 2, Kill Me. 5 years ago. And this, the title of this post, this was posted in the Delphi murder subreddit. The title is In Plain Sight. I stumbled across this live feed after the girls were found, but not identified yet. It was a person saying they were there when the girls were attacked. He said he didn't do anything to stop it because he was a kid too, and was afraid the same thing would happen to him. He was not from Delphi. The killer had picked him up, and they drove at least an hour before arriving at a huge farm. He did not know where he was, but he said he needed to get out of there because the bodies were found and the place was going to be crawling with cops. He said this person who did this would never be caught because no one would think he was capable, but he is. Said the guy would be hiding in plain sight. I have not been able to find the thread again. It has been deleted. I contacted the investigators and the FBI early on and told them what I found. No one has contacted me or ever brought this up again. What do you think? Hoax question mark. Maybe the kid ended up missing too. Anyone else heard anything like this? So I actually have not seen this posted anywhere or heard of this. So this is pretty crazy. Some responses here. This was the first thing I thought of when Carter said at the press conference, this person has posted this on Facebook right after the murders. I always wondered if that's why the age dropped to 18 years old. If possible, if so, possibly that the young bridge guy sketch was the lookout. So this was a conversation February 15th, 2017. And this post used the term in plain sight before the 2019 press conference when Doug Carter used that phrase. Now, there is corroboration here from other posters. I've searched this for ages. I've read the sort of conversation-like form at the time, but haven't been able to find it back. I had forgotten about it, but it came back into my mind when Keegan Anthony Klein came into the picture. But only later on, after hearing and reading him. The childish-like way of expressing themselves seemingly triggered my memory, but geez, I'd like to find the original convo back. So someone posted this from the user to kill me also. It was about the same time they had found the info, but hadn't identified them yet. I live in Las Vegas and didn't know much about the case, so when I stumbled across this feed, I didn't really know what I was looking at. My original search was for Liberty Tax Service. The person had been talking to a woman and a man in this feed. He was talking about the girls and how the guy attacked them. Someone asked him, why didn't you do something? He said, because I'm just a kid too, I was afraid the same thing would happen to me. Then it was mentioned that the bodies were found, and the kid says, I gotta get out of here. This place is going to be crawling with cops. One of the others asked where he was, and he didn't know. He said he had just met the guy, and they drove for about an hour before they arrived at his location, which was kind of a farm. So is this guy hitchhiking? Is this the hitchhiker? Is this where all those hitchhiking rumors came from? He wouldn't give info on the guy's name or his own. Honestly, he seemed like he was impressed by the way the guy controlled the girls. Like he said something like, that guy was awesome. I wish I had paid more attention, but like I said, I was unaware of its importance until later, and when I tried to find the feed, it was gone. The only other thing the kid said that stands out clearly is that he hadn't been home in a couple of days and wondered if anyone was looking for him. He figured the guy had used him to gain the girl's trust because he is a kid. And he said, they're never going to catch this guy. No one would even think he was capable or able to do what he did, but he is. He will be hiding in plain sight. I did talk to the FBI and reported it early on, within 2 weeks of the murder. It took me a minute to decide if it was worth reporting. Like you, I don't know if this was a hoax. I gave them the info and figured they would decide. So this is really, really crazy. So is this... what's the context, though? I mean, this guy, is this a hitchhiking situation? And he didn't... Why would a killer pick up a guy... They go hitchhike. Is this just a partial story and he really didn't want to tell the truth about their relationship or any prior history because he was involved in other criminal activity? But it sounds like he really didn't know that the killer would actually kill them. I mean, that's what it seems like reading this second or third-hand account of the conversation, which obviously there's no actual link to it. But that's the first thing, the impression that I get from it. And apparently, when they were first found, it was stated that 2 female teens were found, but they weren't identified immediately. Also, is this related to Ron Logan calling for an alibi for the specific hours in question before the bodies were found? So another curiosity that we didn't talk about before, obviously the white car at the CPS building was reported, but other reports state that it was a red car. And there are even further statements of an individual being reported getting into a red car. Also, these are all early statements and rumors, so again, there's no verification here yet on any of these, but it's kind of weird. Actually, before we even get to the red car, there's another interesting article here. So, I haven't seen this specific information before. This is WRTV, Indianapolis. Delphi, Indiana, missing teens, 2 bodies found in Carroll County positively ID'd as missing teens by Katie Cox, February 15, 2017. 2 bodies found outside the small community of Delphi, Indiana were positively identified Wednesday as 2 missing Carroll County teens. Liberty German, 14, and Abigail Williams, 13, were reported missing Monday afternoon after they were dropped off to go hiking near the Monon High Bridge just outside of Delphi. Family, friends, and rescue crews combed the area through the evening Monday and could not locate the 2 teens. 2 bodies were found by volunteers. So again, it's clearly stating here, supposedly this is not law enforcement who found the bodies. 2 bodies were found by volunteers on Tuesday, less than a mile from where the girls were originally dropped off. The bodies were found on private property about 50 feet from the shore of Deer Creek. Keep in mind, both sides of the creek were searched.
Over 100 people out searching the area last night, walking both sides of the creek bank, 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 both sides of the creek bank.
So this is 50 feet from the shoreline. That's not a lot of feet. That's quite close. Sources tell Call 6 Investigates that a set of footprints are what led volunteers to the area the bodies were found. It wasn't until Wednesday afternoon that the bodies were positively identified as the missing girls. The deaths are being investigated as a homicide. You know, another curiosity here, let me repeat that last part. Sources tell that a set of footprints are what led volunteers to the area the bodies were found. Footprints! So this is kind of weird. So were the bodies not found in the water, or were they found in the water, then dragged 50 feet up the shore, and the footprints were of the people who dragged their bodies, not of the killers, if they're not the killers? So these other individuals, because then we also have the information that John Weaver relayed, or other parties, that the bodies were found before it was official. So did a group of individuals, volunteers, find the bodies in the water, drag them up, then they didn't want to admit that they dragged them up to contaminate the evidence? They didn't want to admit it. So then the bodies were found again by other people, or was it the same people? And why is it stating that the footprints is what led to them, and why were those footprints not magically there the night before, the late afternoon before. The search started actually before dark. For all the people out there that just have a lot of trouble understanding that the bodies might not have been there the day before. So, or if they were there the day before, totally submerged in the water. I mean, that still doesn't make sense, because supposedly there was a shoe found on the path. So if that shoe was not there the day before, I mean, what does that all mean? And then we, of course, have the middle of the night screams. So, again, highly possible there's the thermal imaging drone that didn't pick them up. I mean, there's both sides of the creek specifically being searched. So there's a lot of information, not just the drone. There's a ton of other information and witness statements that point to the bodies not being there the day before. So what happened the day of that they were found did volunteers, did people who were not their killers find them in the water, drag them up the shore, and then other people found them, or maybe the same people claimed they found them on the 50 feet up the shore? Because in the crime scene tape, it looks like it's farther from the shore. And initially, because I remember all this discussion years ago, supposedly they were not found right on the shore. But a fair number, like a few dozen yards or more, well into like what did they call it? Like a little bowl depression area of the ground, which was claimed why they were missed. So much farther than 50 feet. So again, there's so many conflicting statements here, but this is right from WRTV.com, and there's specific sources that told Call 6 Investigates that footprints specifically were what led to the bodies. Now, furthermore, the article goes on to say something else that I found very interesting. The mystery surrounding the teen's disappearance has had the small community of Delphi on edge. Police do not have any suspects in their death at this time. Indiana State Police released the photo below on Wednesday. They say this man was on the Delphi Historic Trail around the time that Abby and Libby were there. They want to speak to him about what he may have seen. So, whoa. Okay. So to all the people that hallucinate that this guy in the photo is definitely the killer, and that the killer was filmed by Liberty German, is that really true? Because the statement here explicitly states not that he was there at the time, around the time. What does that mean? Does that mean an hour earlier, 2 hours earlier, 3 hours after? Because as I went over in the previous episode about the trail camera, some people believe, again, due to early witness statements, due to early police statement, due to a lot of conflicting early statements, that this image might not be from the phone. It might be from a trail camera or maybe somebody else's phone. Not necessarily at the exact time of the Snapchat, if the Snapchat was even taken that day at that time. Some people point to the weather possibly being slightly different or more or less cloudy, whatever the case may have been. They're stating that it's not accurate and that Snapchat was from 1 or 2 days prior. And again, also based on what Abby was wearing in that photo. Supposedly that's what she might have been wearing 1 or 2 days prior. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean she couldn't have worn the same thing if the clothes were washed or whatever. There's a lot of different theories. But again, the wording here I found interesting, that it's not stated that he was there at the time that Abby and Libby were there, but around the time. And that's why they want to speak to him about what he may have seen. If he was actually walking directly towards them, it's not a may have seen situation. He would have definitely seen them, even if he didn't see what happened after. And they would have stated he was there, that was there at the time that they were there hiking and taking photos. Not around the time. Around could be a half an hour, 2 hours earlier. So again, this is something the coincidence theorists will no doubt ignore. It triggers their dissonance too much. But anybody actually objectively, logically, neutrally analyzing this case and really wants the truth, we have to consider the possibility that this man in the video possibly Ron Logan, or if not Ron Logan, whether he's Ron Logan or not, he may have had nothing to do with the murders of Abby and Libby. Okay, so let's go back to the red car information. Also, people discussing vehicles in general, there's a couple interesting posts here. Most highways are covered with CCTV, and a lot of the time they are mounted on an overpass, on a bridge. Maybe they got lucky. And other people say, yeah, if you go to the Department of Transportation, there's a lot of highways that actually have cameras overlooking them at certain areas. So you would think that they went through all of that, or whatever the closest cameras were. Again, I don't know if we have that information on exactly where all the cameras are, but you would think within a 10, 20, 50-mile area, it's possible they have a car that they're very interested in. But other posters are saying this. It's astounding it took 2 years to mention this car. I also disagree with the lack of description. Understanding you want to ferret out misleading tips, it's good to know the make and color to jog people's memories. Sorry, this investigation has a botched flavor. Another post, some former FBI investigators on HLN said if they had given a description of the vehicle, like a white Camry or a red Ford, they would be flooded with thousands of calls from all over the country with people saying, I saw that car at such and such location. It would waste more time. They just wanted credible sightings of the car at the location during that time. If they know what it looked like, then they know they have a credible eyewitness. This doesn't seem to indicate a botched investigation to me. Like they said, they have a witness. He made mistakes. They have a better description and a better sketch. They think he is younger than what they originally thought. They think he's very familiar with the area. Sounds to me like they are working diligently, and they believe they will solve the case. This was posted 3 years ago. Now, what's weird, though, is in most cases, don't they release the make and model of a vehicle that they're looking for? I mean, this is strange, because in most missing persons cases or murder cases where they're looking for specific information, they do publish, they might not necessarily publish the plate number, but they publish the make and model. In most cases, I mean, people watch the news, they see that. So it is kind of interesting why they would not. I mean, then again, this is definitely an outlier case, regardless of the reasons why for that. Another post here, why do you think law enforcement decided to not release the sketch that was taken from an eyewitness a couple days after the murder, and instead decide to go with the sketch they took 5 months to generate? They published that older heavyset bridge guy sketch for nearly 2 years as the primary suspect. Then they changed back to the sketch they originally had from an eyewitness within the first few days. I wonder what the reason is for that. If they had that sketch from the very beginning of the investigation, why would they decide to not release it until 2+ years later? Or they could have released both sketches. It's very confusing. And that's another good point, too. There's a lot of cases where they release 2 sketches because they're not 100% sure. Because if it's 2 different individuals, there's 2 different persons of interest, not necessarily suspects. They could have released both. It's very confusing to me why they would totally disregard an eyewitness sketch from 2 to 3 days of the murders, only to change their mind 2 years later and make the man in this sketch their main suspect. With this vehicle information that we're just learning about, I have to wonder how people are expected to know what to report. This was over 2 years ago. Memories fade, people move, evidence deteriorates, and we don't even know what kind of vehicle they're looking for. Maybe they don't even know what kind of vehicle they're looking for. The only theory I have that could explain that is that maybe they had scent dogs track a scent to that parking lot, and then it was gone, meaning there was a car parked there. That, or like you said, they know what vehicle they're looking for and need an independent witness to place it there that day. It's very frustrating that this monster is still out there going unpunished for his crimes, despite having an all-bet grainy video, audio, and eyewitness sketch, and there has still been no arrests. I'm losing confidence in law enforcement as the months and years go by. Again, this was 3 years ago. Now, another point here is the reason that this hasn't been solved is because the sketches and the video all have nothing to do with their murders. I'm just floating that theory out there. This is Mindshock. I am not claiming anything is true or untrue. I am not hallucinating to know the variables that I don't know and claiming something is more or less likely. A lot of goofs out there, they try to claim, oh, what's more likely, this or this? Well, without having the variables, without having the critical information you would need to have, it's impossible to state what's more or less likely in this particular case with these particular pieces of evidence. Someone responded this: they would be flooded with thousands of calls from all over the country with people saying, I saw that car. The response to that, if they gave the make and model, the response to that by Aswe Duger is this: as opposed to 0, given the option they chose. I know which one I would pick. So it is kind of weird though. So it's a white or red car. I mean, how would they not know if it was white or red? Or were there two different cars specifically reported? One of them was white, one of them was red, and they actually don't know which one was connected, but they suspect that one of them was connected to the crime. Is that a possibility? An interesting post here connecting the dots also on the Libby and Abby subreddit. Reading these posts, one thing sticks out for me. Law enforcement has focused in on finding someone who can identify the make, model, and or color of a car parked outside the old CPS DCS welfare building on February 13, 2017, anytime between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. This seems like they are connecting very critical dots. Potential verification to put a specific car that may have been owned at the time or borrowed by the POI that day in a location that doesn't align with his alibi. The details of the car that they may already have been withheld, like the audio, the DNA details, the crime scene info, and the cause of death, to have an ironclad case once they are able to press charges. All details that can be used as leverage if the POI decides to plea deal to get the death penalty taken off the table by confirming those details that only the killer would know. Someone out there saw something, anyone in that area on that day, they may have seen a car in or around the location, should report what they saw. What do you have to lose? What seems silly or insignificant may be the one dot that law enforcement needs to crack this case. The locals are going to solve this case for Abby and Libby. I know it. TikTok. This was posted 1 year ago. So I'm actually gonna I'm gonna give a different theory there. If this was completely compromised, so let's say it's a combination of things that weren't specifically law enforcement's fault, like maybe volunteers moving the bodies from the water to the shore and completely compromising the scene, and also the video not being of their killer but reported to be of their killer, all the sketch nonsense, and then now the vehicle at the CPS building. Is it possible that a lot of these pieces of evidence are actually not pieces of evidence? So there's nothing to corroborate there. That's why it hasn't been solved, and that's why there's so many problems. Another astute post here by Santana. They said vehicle and didn't specify car. The only reason to mention the vehicle is if they were sure that it is connected to the murders. If not, they gave Bridge Guy a huge amount of relief because he would know they are going in the wrong direction. I'm sure the FBI, ISP, and anyone involved in making up the press conference know that the vehicle is 100% involved. I think the killer may have exited the area without going back to his vehicle, because they specified a wide range of noon to 5 when asking for information about the vehicle. Either he went back on his own, or a family or friend brought him back to get the vehicle. Or maybe one of them got the vehicle without him. This whole thing isn't about why ask now about a vehicle because nobody will remember. It's about telling the killer that they know where he parked. If they received a ride to retrieve the vehicle, it tells the friend or family member that they know about the vehicle and that they need to come out and tell investigators what they know. Wow, that's a curious theory too. I mean, the outside the box thinkers here. I mean, that is a plausible reason why law enforcement wouldn't specifically give specific details like that. Another post here, really good points. I listened to the 2019 press conference again, and law enforcement 100% was communicating directly to the killer. The mention of the car is the very first thing Carter leads with, so it's gotta be a big piece of the puzzle. Re-listening, knowing that you hear different things now. They asked for information about the vehicle on February 14th, though. My mistake in the original post by referencing the 13th. Why didn't they say the 13th and the 14th? Was there a reason they left out the 13th? Was it because a car wasn't returned until the 14th? So all they care about is what happened for the car retrieval on the 14th. So he arrived and abandoned the car there on the 13th solo, but retrieved it at some point the next day by himself or with someone. Or maybe someone else retrieved it for him. I mean, I don't know why nobody's considering that possibility. Satana responded, they came out later and said that Carter made a mistake and said the 14th when they meant the 13th. Interesting. No shortage of mistakes here. I mean, this is getting really complicated here. Another post here. Unless I'm completely wrong, the police are not asking for the make, model, or color of the vehicle seen parked at the CPS building. I need to check again, but I believe the police asked for information about who was driving the car. That leads me to believe the police know the car particulars, but they want to know who was driving and parked the car there that day. Let's therefore take a leap of faith and assume they have all the details about the car, but the owner said it wasn't me driving the car on the 13th, I was out of town until the 14th. Let's assume he checks out. Cops then go down the line of potential POIs who may have used the car on the 13th. Everyone says, wasn't me. Police are left a suspect who may have an alibi that may check out. Maybe it's an alibi from a wife or child. Maybe that's why they're one tip away from the rest. As I've always maintained, I believe the police know who killed Abby and Libby, but the lack of forensic evidence has them stymied. This was also posted a year ago. Another post here, this is the correct answer. Whether they know the make or model of the car is irrelevant and not what they are asking. Paraphrasing, Carter says information about the driver of the vehicle parked at the old CPS building. They never asked about the car itself. So the other thing is, though, in order to, in that case, if they know about the car, they're not specifically asking, because if someone saw the car but they didn't see the driver and they're calling in, that's not helpful to them. So, but if they do know the driver, they can say what was the make and model of the car in order to verify that they know specifically the individual that could have been driving it. In that context, it obviously does make sense to not reveal the particulars. Now, the satellite photos supposedly show a white car. So, again, that's tough. Okay, so more vehicle information. Apparently a vehicle belonging to the Delphi United Methodist Church, which some people believe an individual from that church is responsible and the real killer. Supposedly that vehicle was near the trails on the 13th. Okay, another vehicle in question. We're going through a lot of different possible vehicles here. There's another vehicle in question about Mr. X, the former mayor who lost his keys. He had an orange pickup truck. He parked his truck the back corner of the cemetery sometime on the 13th. He knocked on the landowner's door at 6:30 on the 13th for permission to search the wooded area behind the cemetery. He received permission and began searching. Supposedly he lost the keys during the search. The next day, the 14th, he searched the woods and found the bodies around noon. So again, there's many different theories here. If innocent parties, if volunteers not responsible for the murders found the bodies in the creek and dragged them up onto land, then did Mr. X here find them after they were moved by innocent parties, or did he find them in the water and drag them up? But it says noon here where these reports were from earlier. So, or did the killers move the bodies back? I mean, yeah, we don't know any of this information. So, apparently, there's also confusion that at the press conference on the projector screen, there's an image of a car. And the thumbnail is for a law enforcement lookup program called Aspen. So, is this, and it kind of looks like a red Dodge Intrepid, but is that just the thumbnail of the program? That's not the vehicle that it's referring to? So is that the confusion on why some people think it's a red car, but it's actually a white car? And the white car supposedly is what some blurry white thing that could be the vehicle is what's visible in the satellite photos. Some more information here regarding security cameras. The industrial building next to the CPS building has security cameras. Another response, I saw one on Anderson's and I wondered if it captured traffic passing by the CPS building and maybe even Highway 25. Do you think the camera caught a parked car at CPS but the pic was too blurry to get the make, model, color? If the camera then caught the vehicle leaving, could the video help determine if the vehicle went south on the highway or not? Another response, apparently it did capture the car at the CPS building, although it was from some distance, and therefore the driver's features were indistinguishable. So these posters here from a year ago are stating that's how law enforcement have this information because they did pick up the car and the driver on security footage. But obviously it's grainy footage from a distance away, so it's not a positive ID on the driver. So I actually don't know. There's a post here on Web Sleuth, December 14, 2018. So was the 2019 press conference the one with the red image thumbnail on the projector screen, which is what led people to believe is red? But here, a poster, Misty, is stating this. I don't recall law enforcement ever mentioning any details of a vehicle of interest connected to the Delphi murders, nor can I locate a link. Many early theories involve Bridge Guy walking to the trail system, even working at the hog plant nearby. But there's also been significant speculation involving either a white or red car. And the car was towed from the cemetery, but it appears unconnected. Then, when Daniel Nations became a much more discussed subject, the sighting of a red car came into play. Or, at times, Bridge Guy was speculated to have been hitchhiking. I could be wrong, but I don't think any source regarding details of a vehicle, or for that matter, its absence, originated from MSM, and as sometimes happens, speculation as a way of morphing into unproven facts. So was it simply that Daniel Nations was a suspect or a person of interest, and he happened to have a red car, and that's where that got roped in? I mean, that's curious. Actually, I think I might have found the original source here. dailymail.co.uk. This is September 28th, 2017. Sex offender 31 arrested for threatening hikers with a hatchet in Colorado may be connected to the unsolved murders of 2 teens in Indiana whose bodies were found on the trail. The man responsible for the murder of 2 teens in Indiana may have been found nearly 1,000 miles away in Colorado. Daniel Nations was arrested on Monday for allegedly threatening hikers on a trail near Woodland Park, Colorado with a hatchet earlier this month. Now, local authorities say police in Indiana suspect the registered sex offender may be connected to the murder of 2 middle school friends in Delphi earlier this year. The bodies of Liberty German 14 and Abigail Williams 13 were found about a quarter mile from a hiking trail in Delphi in February, a day after they planned to hike the trail on their day off from school and went missing. At the time, police released 2 grainy pictures and an audio recording of the possible suspect taken from German's phone, but they got no leads. The same happened in July when they released a composite sketch. The Indiana State Police confirmed that they are investigating Nations as a potential suspect in the double murders, but refused to comment further. Indiana State Police spokesman Sergeant Kim Riley said it's too early to make a definite connection. Please keep in mind the Indiana State Police has received more than 1,000 photos of persons alleged to be similar in appearance to the composite sketch of the Delphi person of interest, Riley said in a statement. Each and every one of these tips are investigated for any potential connection to our case. We will give the same attention to the person arrested in Colorado, but right now there is nothing that definitively connects this person to our investigation. If that should change with this tip or any other tip, rest assured we would be sharing such news with all media sources. Nations, who hails from Indianapolis, was identified as a suspect in the menacing case thanks to his car. Around the same time that a man was threatening people with a hatchet near Mount Hermon, a bicyclist, Tim Watkins, went missing and was later found shot dead. Before the body was found, one of Watkins' friends was aiding in the search when he noticed a man in a red car drive by the staging area several times. He found it suspicious, so he took a picture. Police then used the picture to track down the car, which they found parked outside Woodland Park Pond and Lone Monday afternoon. They saw a man and a woman get into the car, then pulled it over. Inside was Daniel Nations sitting in the passenger seat, his wife driving, and 2 kids in the back seat. What? And this was actually on the news. Public needs help to identify suspects. So one of Watkins' friends snapped a picture of a red car, then circled around the scene a few times during the search. And so this photo of the red car was aired on the news. Again, another example of exact make, model, license plate, all in the car. Then officers questioned Daniel about the menacing incident on Mount Harmon Road, and he admitted that there was a hatchet in the back of the vehicle, but he claimed he was not connected to the case. "We're not that kind of people," he told officers, according to the arrest affidavit. He also admitted that his wife's rifle was in the trunk, which she brought for protection after the vehicle was broken into. After running background reports, officers realized that the husband and wife both had non-extraditable FTA warrants from other states, and that Daniel was a registered sex offender and had a previous conviction for domestic violence in Indiana. Their license plates were also from Indiana and were expired. Daniel was booked into the Teller County Jail on a charge of weapons possession by a previous offender. Other charges are pending. He is not currently a suspect in Watkins' death. Okay, so is this just a conflation that occurred with the red car because there was a red car in this other case, and Daniel Nations was talked about as a potential person of interest or suspect in the Delphi case? So his red car kind of got overlapped with a car that was not specified to be red at the CPS building. Okay, so what does everybody make regarding this early information, unreleased information? I mean, this mind-shocking account of a kid that witnessed the actual abduction and possibly the murder as well. Was he hitchhiking? How well did he know the other guy? Or was it all just made up? I mean, it's so hard to say because seemingly a lot of these theories and early rumors, they seem to match up with the context of law enforcement's statements at the press conferences. Now, that doesn't mean they're true in any way. Again, to all the goofs out there hallucinating, I am claiming any of these are true. I am not claiming anything is true or untrue. I wasn't there. I don't know. But if you just line up some of these theories and the context of what law enforcement was stating at the press conferences, theoretically, these pieces could fit. And now when you add up all the weirdness with the way the bodies were found, reported, not found initially, I mean, it's just such a problem. It's such a problem, especially when you're trying to prosecute or gather evidence, because if volunteers actually did pull the bodies out of the water, I mean, what are you going to do with that? So again, all the Mindshock listeners, feel free to give your own thoughts, theories, opinions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind to any of this information in the comment section. I mean, I do not think this case is as cold as it seems. The more you look at everything, the more it seems that law enforcement does indeed have certain pieces of the puzzle. Now, are they the correct pieces? That we don't know. But it might not be the case that they're complete Keystone Cops. They might actually have solid pieces, and they're just missing the ability to link them. And perhaps it's only a matter of time now. Hope everybody found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, help us get more mind-shocking content out there and keep up awareness in unsolved cases, cold cases, missing persons cases, you could donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. A like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.